When the sirens cut through the cicadas, Ora Mae Johnson had already tucked the apricot pie into the window to cool and laid a dish towel over the grease-stained trunk that wasn't a trunk at all. The boys who broke her kitchen window would swear later they were looking for cash. All they found were passports that didn't look like her and a key stamped with numbers the county sheriff hadn't seen in 20 years. Then someone pulled down the attic stairs, and the weight of a forgotten war fell into the room rifles wrapped in oilcloth and names no church wants to sing over. Ora Mae looked at the guns like a woman recognizes her bones showing through a dress. "I suppose," she whispered, "y'all are here for me. Quick heads up before we jump in. If you're into real stories, strange disappearances, and the kind of truths people try to bury, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell so you don't miss what comes next. All right, let's get into it." In small-town Lark, Mississippi, Ora Mae Johnson, 72, beloved babysitter and church mother, has lived a spotless life for 3 decades. But a late-night break-in exposes a hidden arsenal and fake passports that tie her to a decades-old political bombing in Chicago. As rumors spread and federal interest rekindles, investigative Sergeant Lenora Pike, herself a daughter of Lark, must decide if the woman who raised half the town is a domestic terrorist or the survivor of a cause that chewed through its children. Meanwhile, Ora Mae's granddaughter Nia digs into the past and wakes sleeping ghosts. A charismatic firebrand lover, a stolen identity, and a dead friend whose name never made the papers. Old comrades surface. Old enemies, too. Beneath sweet tea and Sunday hats, Lark carries a history that reopens like a wound. The kitchen smelled like butter and prayers, the kind you bake into crust so no one can accuse you of forgetting the Lord. Ora Mae pulled the pie from the oven and set it near the window, the steam rising like a spirit leading a body. Her granddaughter Nia was supposed to be home by 9. It was 1:45. The clock over the doorway ticked like a cricket with a grudge. "Girls got wheels now," Ora Mae muttered to the empty room. "Gets a sedan and forgets God invented time." She eased into her chair at the little table, knees cracking, the pearl-handled knife on the placemat out of habit. Some women kept their wedding rings there. Ora Mae kept steel. Lightning flickered far away, the rumble more memory than thunder. Out on the street, 2 boys were reciting their lives too loud, bragging and laughing as if noise could protect you in Mississippi. She didn't recognize the voices. New growth. She let her eyes slide shut, the sound of cicadas washing her in endless summer. She'd survived 100 small deaths just to be here, to have a kitchen that remembered her footsteps. Glass shattered. Ora Mae stood without thinking. The knife was in her hand, like it had been born there. A rock rolled to a stop by the stove, its edges smeared with dust and youthful stupidity. She listened. Whisper scrape of sneakers on tile. A second boy, breathing too hard. "Just grab the jar, man." She got coffee money. That's it. "Hello," Ora Mae said, soft as the first word of a hymn. Silence, then a curse. A shadow moved in the hall, thin and unmoored, a kid's outline against the cross-stitched prayer on the wall. The smaller one tried to dart past the counter. He looked 12, pale in the moonlight, eyes too wide. "You don't want to do this," she said. "We ain't here for you," the second one whispered, taller, careful. "We just want—" "You don't even know what you want." The taller boy flicked eyes to the jelly jar where she kept singles for the mailman's Christmas card. He took a step. She sighed. "If my granddaughter were here, she'd have the sense to call the police and the heart to give you each a slice. Lucky for you I got both." The sirens arrived like a decision made elsewhere. Someone must have heard the glass. The boys panicked. The tall one lunged for the hall closet, the one with the string dangling that pulled down the attic stairs. "Nuh-uh," Ora Mae said, but too late. He'd yanked on the cord. The ladder unfolded with a wooden clatter. A rank smell slipped down. Machine oil and time. The boys froze. She saw the moment they became witnesses, their faces reflecting back that attic's truth. The front door burst open, and Sergeant Lenora Pike entered first, pistol low and eyes level. Lenora looked like her mother around the mouth, kind until she wasn't. Behind her came Deputy T.J. Lambert, tall and rangy, sweat bright on his forehead. "Hands," Lenora said. The boys shot their hands up, trembling. "Miss Johnson?" Lenora's voice softened by muscle memory. The number of times she'd had pie in this room could break a heart. "You okay?" "I'm fine, baby." Ora May set the knife down, handle pointed away. They didn't take anything, just bold. TJ moved past the boys to close the window, glass crunching under his boots. He glanced up at the open attic and frowned. "You keep anything up there, Miss Johnson?" "Christmas bulbs," Ora May said. "All junk." Lenora nodded once, then flicked her eyes to TJ, and he got the message. He flicked on his flashlight and climbed 3 rungs. "Huh? What?" Lenora asked. TJ didn't answer. He climbed all the way up. The light swept, landed, paused. Sarge?" Lenora gave a weary look, this man, always dramatics, and climbed after him. Ora May stood utterly still, hands folded like church. The boys, forgotten for a moment, stared with the morbid curdled curiosity that gets you in trouble. "Miss Johnson," Lenora said from the dark above, "may I come down with something you might want to explain?" She came down slow. First a canvas-wrapped, long-shaped TJ handed to her, then a metal trunk, old as sign, the kind with brass corners and a keyhole the size of a dime. Lenora's face had changed. The tenderness that lived at the bottom of her eyes had sealed behind habit. "This yours?" "House is mine," Ora May said. "I need you to answer direct." "Yes." The word tasted like a shoe you never thought you'd have to chew. TJ laid the canvas on the table and untied the cord. Oil bled into the fabric like a stubborn stain. He rolled the cloth back and revealed a rifle that didn't belong in any kitchen. He glanced at the cereal and gave a whistle he swallowed when Lenora cut him sharp. There were more. 2 more long guns. A shorter one with a stock that had been sawed off clean and mean. 3 handguns wrapped in separate cloth. And a false bottom in the trunk that coughed up passports with faces that could have been hers if you weren't looking too close. Names that could pronounce a life you didn't live. One passport had a picture so young it made Lenora blink. "What is all this?" TJ asked, too loud. "What it looks like," Ora May said. Lenora held the oldest passport up to the light. The name read Joan Elizabeth Carter. The photo was a much younger woman with a jaw carved by certainty. The stamp on it, O'Hare International, 1979. Her chest tightened. Chicago. The word carried weight like a fall through ice. "Miss Johnson," Lenora said, "I'm going to ask you to sit down." "I am sitting." "I mean at the station." The boys jolted, like someone had pinched them. "We ain't got nothing to do with." "Hush," Lenora snapped, then softer. "Y'all are going home to your mamas. Door was broken when you got here, and this kitchen scared you straight. Understood?" They nodded so hard she worried for their necks. She turned back to Ora May. "I can't ignore this, ma'am. Not even for pie. Didn't expect you to." Ora May glanced at the pie, still warm and uncut, and forced a smile. "Wrap me a slice for later?" By the time Nia arrived, the street was a carnival of blue light. She braked too fast, tires chirping, the old Honda coughing like a smoker. Her braids were in a messy bun, and she wore the grin of a girl who'd gotten away with being late again, until she saw the squad car. The grin died on her mouth. What happened? Nia said to no one and everyone. Neighbors had gathered in robes and lawn chairs, a Greek chorus with gossip in their throats. Mrs. Ellery from next door had already found a way to be in the front row. They found a whole military in your grandma's attic, she hissed, delighted horror softening the edges of pity. Shut up, Miss Ellery, Nia said, but without heat. She shouldered through to the porch, just as Lenora guided Ora May out, hand on her elbow. It wasn't a perk walk. It was careful, respectful, like escorting your aunt out of a crowded choir stand. Grandma, Nia said. It's fine, sugar, Ora May said. The lie came smooth from practice. Keep the oven on low for 10 minutes, then cut the pie. Share with the boys outside. I'll be back when. Back when what? Nia's voice broke like a young branch. Where are you going? Lenora stepped in. We're just going to ask Miss Johnson some questions down at the station. Your grandmother is not under arrest at this time. Nia stared at the rifles, at the trunk, at the false bottoms ghosts in the eyes of the neighbors. What is all that? Junk? Ora May said. Old junk I forgot about. Grandma. Do as I say, Nia. The girl nodded once, tears wet and proud. She stepped forward and kissed her grandmother's cheek. Ora May smelled coconut oil in youth and the sharp, clean worry of a child whose foundation just tilted. She squeezed Nia's hand once, a code learned in pews. Be still. As they eased her into the back of the cruiser, Nia caught Lenora's sleeve. You know her, she said, accusation and plea wrestling. You grew up on her porch. You ate her greens. Lenora's jaw flexed. I know, she said. That's why I'm doing this right. What even is this? Nia demanded. Finding out if the woman who raised me and half the street ever stopped running. Lenora closed the door gentle. The click sounded like a hinge on an old box. Lark's police station was more a remodeled schoolhouse than a house of law. The paint peeled where the budget ran out. A framed photo of the first black chief hung slightly crooked. The night sergeant's desk lamp threw a cone of light that made everything just important enough to hurt. Lenora walked Ora May into interview 2, the room with the blue chair, because it felt kinder. She set a paper cup of water on the table and a napkin beneath it because her mama had raised her to mind furniture. I want my lawyer, Ora May said before she sat. Lenora nodded. Who? Evan Bright. Lenora didn't blink, but her eyebrows lifted. From Jackson? He's expensive. He owes me. For what? You go on and call him, baby. Lenora shrugged, stepped out, dialed. The phone barely trilled once. Bright, a voice said, rich as bourbon. This is Sergeant Lenora Pike, Lark PD, your client. My aunt, Evan said, and the peach pit in Lenora's stomach sank. Is she breathing? She's fine. We recovered several firearms and some documents from her residence. I'll be there in an hour, he said. Do not ask her a thing until I walk through your door. You're 2 hours away. I'll be there in 1. He was, somehow, in 54 minutes, smelling of linen and highway. He hugged Ora May long and hard in front of everyone, and then used his body like a door. When they sat, he leaned forward, elbows on knees, the way he did for juries. Auntie, he said, voice a private room. You ready for hard truth? She said, Child, we tripped over it. He smiled without joy. Sarge? Lenora folded her arms. Before we begin, I need to advise. No need, Evan said. She's not answering. I'm going to make a statement for the record, and then we're going home. Home? TJ laughed from the doorway. She had enough artillery to stage a parade. Evan didn't look at him. My aunt is a respected member of your community. Those items are heirlooms and curiosities from a turbulent time, stored and forgotten. She is cooperating. If you believe there is a case, you will contact my office, and we will schedule a formal interview. If we believe? TJ sputtered. Chicago might call us before breakfast. Lenora cut her eyes, and TJ found a reason to steady a stapler elsewhere. We're impounding the items, Lenora said, and I need to ask about these passports. You can ask, Evan said, and I can say no. Good night, Sergeant. You're going to Stonewall and let this town chew her up? I'm going to not let you build a case with a kindly old woman's exhaustion. If you've got something, bring it. If not, take it up with your conscience. Don't worry, Lenora said. I've had that conversation before. They left through the side door to avoid the night news camera that had sprouted from somewhere like a weed. Nia was in the parking lot with a sweatshirt over her tank top, arms folded against the humid dark. When she saw her grandmother, she went right for her like a tide. You okay? Nia's whisper buzzed with anger and relief. They didn't. I'm fine, Ora May said. Did you cut the pie? I know. Then the devil truly is at work, she said, and Nia laughed despite herself, a wet hiccup that apologized for being young. Evan unlocked his sedan. Auntie, I'm taking you to my motel. You can't go home tonight. Why not? Because every journalist with a map is going to be on your porch by dawn. We'll go back when I've had time to put up a wall. Evan, she said, voice going gentle and then flinty, I'm going home. Auntie, I said what I said. She turned to Nia. Drive me. Nia nodded like a soldier. Evan stared at them both and then sighed the sigh of a man who wins often enough to know the shape of losing. Fine, but I'm following you, and I'm sleeping on that couch. You're not too pretty for the floor, Ora May said, and he grinned like a boy who'd been seen. Home tasted like cooling sugar and old decisions. Nia put water on for tea she didn't want and watched her grandmother move around the kitchen as if the earlier scene had been theater. The attic stairs were back in place, the trunk gone, the table naked without its oil-stained bundle. The absence had its own smell. Grandma, Nia said, unable to keep it inside any longer, what is happening? Ora May set cups on saucers like chess pieces. She did not answer. She pulled a tin of loose black tea from the cabinet, the tin older than Nia's entire life, the metal dented by moves that were supposed to be temporary. Steam whistled. She poured the kettle. Chicago, Nia said, fishing with what she had caught earlier. Did you live there? I lived everywhere for a spell. Did you? Were you in a gang or something? Gang is small, Ora May said. She sat, her hands finally still. We thought we were a country. Nia blinked. What does that even mean? The passports, the guns. Words like freedom are cheap if you never buy them, she said. I paid cash. I was young. I was angry. I was smart enough to be used. Nia's mouth worked. Her grandmother, who taught her to plant tomatoes by the lunar calendar, who embroidered baby names into quilts for funerals and births, who came to 6th grade career day as neighborhood architect, talking about how to build community out of leftovers. This woman was telling her she'd been, what? A soldier? A bomb went off in Chicago, Nia said slowly, recalling something from a late-night podcast, a scar of history she'd only brushed. At a courthouse or a police building, people died. People always die, Ora May said. That's the first lie they tell you. That death changes the math. It only changes who's counted. Did you? Nia couldn't say it. Your aunt, Evan said from the doorway, is not answering those questions, Nia. Not tonight. She has rights. We all do. Or we're supposed to. I don't want her rights. I want the truth. The truth, Ora May said, is heavier at night. Then I'll carry it, Nia said, fierce. Ora May looked at her granddaughter and saw the sharp edge of herself reflected back, polished by schools and phones and a future that hadn't learned to be afraid yet. She felt the old pull, the dangerous pride that had led her up too many stairs. Go to bed, she said. I'm 18, not 8. Then go to bed like a grown woman. Decide if you still want to hear me in the morning. Nia squared her shoulders. I do. We'll see, Ora May said. Lenora couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen counter with the beer-sweating rings onto a campaign flyer she was using as a coaster. Vote Chief Harold Baines for County Commissioner Trusted Experience. Baines had brought her on as the youngest black Sergeant Lark had seen, had taught her how to unknot the tight places without yanking. He was retiring to chase politics. He'd told her to keep her head, not her heart, in the game. She thought about the passports. She'd run the names already through the system that morning, because she was who she was. Joan Elizabeth Carter, Lila Dunn, Gloria Finch. Different birthdays, different cities. Each had a pattern if you looked sideways. Each had a stamp from the late 70s or early 80s, and then nothing. She pulled a file from her bag. Yellowed clippings from a case her mother had helped her cut out when Lenora was a kid, making shadow boxes of other people's tragedies. The 1978 Chicago Federal Annex bombing. 2 dead, more injured. A group claiming responsibility. The People's Hearth. A domestic uprising with a manifesto and a signature. A string of arsons. A bank robbery. An Army Reserve armory theft. A courthouse bomb. The hearth burned hot for 5 years and then quietly went to ash. No big trial. No great takedown. Just arrests that never stuck and suspects that evaporated. Her mother used to say, "The thing about a hearth is it looks warm right up until it burns down the house." Back then it was parable. Tonight it was homework. In a photo from a protest the week before the bombing, a woman stood in the second row with a headscarf tied tight and a mouth pursed on a slogan like it was a lemon. Lenora couldn't swear it was Ora May, but she couldn't swear it wasn't. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ride to voicemail, and then, impulse pricking her, played it. A voice sanded down by time and cigarettes. "Sergeant Pike, you don't know me. Name's Isaac Redding. I used to teach well, never mind. I'm calling because you just kicked a tired dog. You found the wrong attic." Lenora sat up. "Call back," she said to the robot. The buzz came again immediately, as if the voice had been in the hallway. She answered. "Redding? You from Lark?" He asked, born and baptized. "Then you know who I'm talking about. I found a lot of things tonight," she said carefully. "I don't know what you think I know." He exhaled. She imagined yellow fingers, a dirty window. "Don't be cute. You bother Ora Mae Johnson again, and you'll bring down a wind that don't care whose roof it takes." "Is that a threat?" "It's a weather report." "Who are you to her?" "A man who owes her his life, and a man she owes a story." "You were People's Hearth," Lenora said, making a guess and hating herself for hoping. Silence. Then soft, "We were kids." Hearth sounded like soup. "We thought we were building a kitchen." "The kitchen blew up," she said. He laughed, a cough. "You're not wrong." "Why call me?" "Because you sound like your mother," he said, and it felt like a hand had reached through the phone and squeezed her heart. "She chased me one fall like I'd stolen Sunday." "I did. She caught me anyway." "And she gave me a cup of coffee and told me I could still be other things. Don't take that from the girl." "Girl?" "Granddaughter, Nia. She'll pick at this until it bleeds. You need to decide whether to give her stitches or a map." "I'm law enforcement," Lenora said, reflex clattering. "Not a counselor." "Baines is gone next year. You think that badge makes you a wall? Sometimes it's just an umbrella." He cleared his throat. "You want answers, Sarge? Meet me tomorrow. The old cotton gin outside town. Noon. Come alone. Leave your loyalty at the door." The line clicked. Lenora sat very still, the beer warm in her hand. The old cotton gin had burned when she was 12. Kids went there to dare each other to climb the rafters. If Isaac Redding was real, if he had been what she suspected, she might be about to step into a story she couldn't control. She looked at the clipping again, at the blurred face with the lemon mouth. She imagined sugar, fire, a woman with a trunk that wasn't furniture. She texted TJ. Take first shift on Ms. Johnson's block. Quiet watch. Unmarked car. Report any visitors. Copy, he wrote, adding a winky face that made her want to throw her phone. Morning peeled back the night like tape off old paint. The news truck parked at the end of the block before sunrise. A skinny white anchorwoman in a blazer the color of a bruise, practicing the phrase, "shocking discovery." Evan planted himself on the stoop with a mug of coffee, bare feet on the concrete, daring anyone to step. He had a cease and desist letter folded neatly by his elbow. Inside, Nia stood at the kitchen sink and watched her grandmother shell peas. The simple rhythm conned nothing. "You always told me not to lie," Nia said. "Still good counsel. Then tell me." "Tell you what?" "Who you are." Ora May smiled, slow. "I am the woman who got you to your first day of kindergarten and clapped so loud the teacher jumped. I am the woman who made heavy cream with a whisk like her life depended. I am the woman who buried your mama and didn't let the dirt take me too. That's not what I'm asking." "It is, though," she said. Nia slammed the faucet off. Water dripped in stubborn beats. "Did you kill anyone?" Silence expanded to fill the kitchen like bread rising. Evan appeared in the doorway, antennae up. He started to speak, and Ora May lifted a hand, and he stopped. "Not with my hands," she said finally. "And with what?" Nia whispered. "With belief." The girl flinched like she'd been slapped. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what, baby? That you don't get a straight line from suffering to salvation? That sometimes the road goes through fire? You think that would have helped you spell words in 3rd grade? The world took enough from you. I wanted to give you soft things." "Soft things?" Nia said, gesturing toward the attic like it could still judge them. "Like rifles?" Ora May sighed. "The softest thing in this world is a woman choosing not to use a gun she's learned to love. That's softness with sharp edges. You don't know yet." "Teach me," Nia said, and it wasn't a dare. It was a plea, rated out of love and fear and the hunger for origin. Evan rubbed his forehead. "Auntie, we should." "I know the shoulds," she said. "They got long legs." She looked at Nia. "You go to community college today?" "I'm taking a gap year." "I let you say that because I didn't have the gospel ready to fight it yet," she said, dry. "You'll go next fall. Do your general ed, then we'll talk." "I'm not a kid." "No," she said. "You're a bridge. And bridges fail when too many people drive over them at once." A shadow crossed the window. Nia glanced out and saw a man on the sidewalk in a navy suit that didn't belong to this block. He was neither cop nor neighbor. He had the look of someone who had learned not to be photographed unless he wanted to be. "Auntie," Evan said, arm out to block the view, but it was too late. The doorbell rang, polite as a debt collector. Evan opened it 2 inches. The man had eyes like rebar. "Mr. Bright," he said, "good to see you again." "Don't think we've met?" Evan lied, fatigue tucked into his charm. "Sure you have," the man said. "I just look different. May I come in?" "No. I represent parties with an interest in recovering some property that belonged to them a long time ago. Housekeeping issue." "We're tidy," Evan said. "Your aunt has our sympathies," the man said, glancing past him toward the kitchen, where Ora May had gone still as a deer. "We're sorry for her inconvenience last night, but we'd like to avoid any further mess." "Who are you?" Nia said, slipping under Evan's arm with the agility of the small and determined. The man smiled, thin. "A friend of the family." "Which family?" "The one you don't get invited to, Miss Johnson." He reached into his jacket slowly. Evan tensed, but the man only removed a business card, creamy and blank except for a phone number and a single initial, H. Evan didn't take it. "You're trespassing." "I'm delivering sentiment," the man said. "Tell Ms. Johnson that old accounts can be closed amicably, or they can be audited." The smile never touched his eyes. He slid the card into the door jamb and walked away like he had all the time in the world. Who was that? Nia asked when Evan shut the door with more force than necessary. The future, Evan said, and it's early. What does he want? Something your grandma held for someone else. Or something she took. He turned to Ora May. Which is it? She was looking at the ceiling like the attic could answer. Both. Law enforcement, Evan said gently. And now, anybody else coming to breakfast? Old friends, she said. And a man in a burned-out gin who thinks I owe him a confession. Nia's head snapped. You're going somewhere? Don't you start sounding like that, Sergeant, Ora May said. Lenora is a good cop, Nia said automatically. She's a good girl who learned how to hold a gun without dropping her moral. That's rare. Doesn't make her right. Meet who? Evan asked. Ora, Nia said, pleading now. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. Her grandmother's eyes softened. Sweeten the tea. Answer the door only if the knock sounds like it knows our names. And if it's the Lord, make him wait till I get back. You can't go alone, Evan said. I'm not alone, she said. I got ghosts. Evan closed his eyes, pinched the bridge of his nose, and exhaled. Fine, I'm driving. No, she said. You stay and put out fires. Then I'm following. Do what you want, she said, and kissed his cheek like a benediction she didn't believe in anymore. The road to the old gin cut past soybean fields and a billboard that declared in peeling paint, Jesus saves. But also vote. The gin itself crouched in a field like an abandoned sermon, red brick scarred black by the fire that ate it when Lenora was a kid. She parked under a ghosted sign and got out, the heat already mean. Isaac Redding was waiting in the shadow of the loading dock, thinner than the voice had implied, or maybe the decades had hollowed him. He wore a denim jacket despite the temperature and had a paperback stuffed in the pocket like a talisman. His hair was a gray corona, his smile reluctant. You came alone? He asked. I always do, she lied. Good. Means I can talk without hearing your partner's thoughts through the crown of his head. He jerked his chin toward the rafters, and she knew without looking that someone had eyes on them. She pretended she didn't. You knew my mother, she said. She chased me up on that north road, the one that curves like a snake trying to bite its own tail. I'd set fire to a storage building that held arrest records. Thought I was saving people. Might have been burning history. Your mama pulled me into her car while my lungs were still full of smoke and told me I didn't have to be an arsonist to be brave. He winced. I didn't listen good, but I remembered her face. Why call me now? Because the woman you took from her kitchen isn't who the news will say she is. And because she's exactly who you think she might be if you've got good instincts. Which is? Somewhere between saint and sinner. We all learned to dance on that line. People died in Chicago. Yes, he said, the word unflinching. And people were already dying, and we were too young to count, right? We thought a bomb could be a paragraph in a long argument, and not a period. That was our sin, thinking we could punctuate. Where does Ora May fit? He looked at the horizon. She never liked her birth name. Said it was a door someone else built. She took new names and wore them like coats. She was the bravest of us. Or the most stubborn. She taught me how to make a Molotov on a Tuesday and how to hold a baby on a Wednesday. He smiled, pained. You'd understand if he ever saw her make biscuits. Violence and love use the same wrists sometimes. Lenora swallowed. Was she at the annex? She was supposed to be, he said, and the sentence skittered across the heat like a lizard. But the plan shifted. Someone else took her slot. He, Redding's voice snagged. He died. His name? She asked. He looked at her with a softness that hurt. You don't know it yet. Tell me. Not my story to offer. I will say this. We believed we were striking a match under a country that wouldn't boil its own water. The country struck back. Some of us went to prison. Some of us went under. Some of us married men who worked at the post office and learned to bury rifles in attics and make apricot pie. Are you confessing? I'm remembering, he said. It's legal. You asked me to come to warn me? To ask you to listen when she speaks. She won't be noble. She won't be neat. But she'll be truer than the press releases and the bureaucrats who will come down here with their New Balances and their iced coffees to chew at her like she's jerky. I'm a cop, Lenora said. My job is to keep your people safe. He nodded. Sometimes that means keeping the story safe until it can come out without killing anyone else. You think this will kill someone? I think the past is a jealous thing, he said. It likes to take back what you stole. A car door slammed somewhere out of sight. Lenora's hand went to her hip. Redding didn't flinch. That'll be H, he said simply. H? She felt the initial like a splinter. House, Redding said. He runs favors you thought time erased. Criminal? Archaeologist. He wiped his mouth. He digs up debts. Lenora's phone buzzed TJ. Unmarked sedan just rolled by Miss Johnson's twice. White male driver, late 40s, navy suit. Plate temp tag. Redding saw her face change and nodded. He'll go back. He's testing the fence. What does he want? Something that can buy him leverage, Redding said. A tape. A ledger. A name. What name? He looked at her like a man at a slot machine about to pull the arm. Yours if you're not careful. She turned to go, instincts firing. If you know where it is, she said over her shoulder, tell me. I can put it somewhere safe. Redding laughed. Safer than an old woman's kitchen? Don't flatter yourself. Then why talk to me? Because you still look like a person who can be persuaded by good bread. He lifted a hand. Go on, Sarge. Your town is already awake. On her way back into Lark, Lenora passed a pickup. She recognized the way you know a childhood bully when he's gone gray. Deputy Chief Walt Parrish. Window down, elbow out, smirk like a razornick. He looked her up and down like she'd dressed wrong for church. Morning, Pike, he drawled. Chief, she said, keeping it neutral. You got yourself a mess for breakfast. I'll clean it. You'll try, he said. But this one's going to require federal napkins. FBI called Baines. Wants the rifles. And the passports. They can have the guns, she said. The passports are evidence in a possible identity fraud case, which is ours. You talking to yourself or me? He asked, amused. She didn't answer. He tipped an imaginary hat and drove on, dust parting like a curtain behind him. Her phone buzzed again from an unknown number. She answered. Pike. A woman's voice as calm as a lake. Sergeant Pike, this is Special Agent Maris Klein, FBI, Jackson Field Office. I'm 30 minutes out. I'd appreciate a briefing when I arrive. You'll get it, Lenora said. At the station. I prefer the house. I prefer the station. Silence like two women testing the strength of the other's shoes. Then, station it is, Klein said. See you soon. Lenora hung up and muttered, we're hosting a convention. She pressed the gas. Back at the house, Ora May had changed into the dress she wore for funerals and for fights she didn't plan to lose. Nia hovered, a small orbit desperate to become a moon. Evan took calls and sent emails and built walls and knew in his bones none of it would hold. The knock on the door 3 minutes later was soft. A knock that knew their names. Nia froze. Who? Old friend, Ora May said. She went to the door and opened it without asking who, because some questions you ask with your lungs. The woman on the porch wore a floral church dress and a face the years had not been kind to. Her hair was cut close, no nonsense. Her eyes were the color of ash. She looked at Ora May and shook her head, a laugh breaking like a bad wave. You still got better timing than me, she said. Leela, Ora May whispered. and every name she'd ever carried realigned in her mouth. "Don't call me that on this street," the woman said. "Not yet." Evan stepped forward, the lawyer always, the nephew sometimes. "Do I know you?" "You argued a bail hearing for my niece," the woman said. "You were loud and right. It shocked me." She looked past into Nia. "You must be the granddaughter. You have your grandmother's eyes when she's lying." "I'm not lying," Ora May said. "You're not telling," Lila whoever she was now said. "Which is different. You brought it?" Ora May asked quietly. The woman nodded, then shook her head, then half laughed at herself. "I brought something. Whether it's what you think we're going to fight about." "Bring it in," Ora May said. "Wait," Evan said, hands up. "Who are you exactly?" The woman extended a hand. "I'm nobody," she said. "And I'm about to make all your lives harder." She stepped into the kitchen, and the air changed like weather. At the station, Maris Klein shook Lenora's hand and looked around the lobby like she was trying to decide if this stage would hold her lines. She was black, mid-40s, tailored in a way that refused comment, her hair in a neat twist and her smile deployed with care. "Small towns," she said without disdain or affection. "Everybody's ghosts share pews. Who told you that?" Lenora asked. "My grandmother," she said, and for a second there were two women in a room full of uniforms, listening for a different drum. They went into the conference room. Klein spread photos across the table-grainy surveillance angles from a warehouse in Indiana dated 2 months ago. A man in a navy suit exchanging a flat, square object for a roll of cash from someone whose face was always almost visible, and then not. Initials on the back. H. "You know him?" Klein asked. "Not personally," Lenora said. "He thinks the People's Hearth left behind something useful. A ledger. A tape. The rumor is there's a confession in a safety deposit box that could absolve certain people or destroy them. He's selling the rumor like lemonade." Lenora felt a humorless grin tilt her mouth. "You people still working the hearth?" "Domestic terrorism has a long tail," Klein said. "Your Ms. Johnson may not be the whale, but she's a fin in the water. We'd like to talk to her. She has counsel." "Of course," Klein said. "We're civilized." "Define civilized," Lenora said, and Klein smiled like they could, in another story, be friends. "Who's your temper for?" Klein asked. "Her or yourself?" "Both," Lenora said. "All." Klein gathered the photos. "I don't care about your pie, Sergeant. I care if those guns have been fired in the last 40 years. And I care who ordered the bomb that killed a janitor and a clerk whose names no one says out loud. If your Ms. Johnson knows, she's going to free herself, or we will free the truth without her. And what if the truth breaks the few things we've built here that are worth keeping?" Lenora asked. Klein stacked the photos and slid them into a folder. Then maybe they weren't built right. In the kitchen, the woman set a grocery bag on the table and pulled out a black metal box, scratched, unmarked, except for a small dent in one corner. Nia leaned forward like a tide pulled by the moon. "What is it?" she asked. "A habit," the woman said. She took out a key on a chain and slid it toward Ora May. "And a betrayal." Ora May didn't touch the key. "You kept it," she said, wonder and anger braided tight. "I hid it," the woman said. "I came to bring it back before someone less sentimental found it." "Who is less sentimental?" Evan asked. "A man with one letter for a name," she said. "H," Nia said, and the woman's eyes snapped to hers with respect. "You're fast," the woman said. "That's a blessing and a flaw." "Open it," Nia said. "No," Ora May said. "Yes," the woman said at the same moment. They stared at each other. Decades of arguments condensed into one. "You always wanted to look," the woman said. "I always wanted to forget." "And you think forgetting changes what's inside?" The woman's mouth trembled into a smile that quit before it got anywhere. "No." Evan cleared his throat. If we open that here, we're creating a crime scene that we don't control. If we don't, we're sitting on a bomb. Look at the lawyer thinking in nouns, the woman said, amused and bitter. It's a box. It's a bruise. It's a memory. It doesn't explode. I've seen memories explode, Nia said quietly. The woman looked at her long. What's your name, baby? Nia. Nia, you want to know who your grandmother is. You think the contents of this thing will answer that question. The truth is, this will only tell you who she was once in a room with, who she promised things to, who promised things to her. The person she is? That's the one who makes her breakfast. The one who buried your mama and still got up the next day. Her eyes flicked to Orome, softened. But if we're going to live through this, we might as well carry the same map. Open it, Orome said then, voice steady. We can't stand guard over a secret we don't share. Evan swallowed. If there's anything that implicates, everything implicates, Orome said. That's the trouble with being alive. She picked up the key with hands that had kneaded bread and built fires and soothed fevered foreheads. She fitted to the lock. It slid home like it had been waiting for her particular grief. She turned. The box opened. And the past stood up. The box breathed cold when the seal broke, that little puff of trapped air, carrying the acid smell of old paper, oil, and something metallic like fear. Inside was no gleam, just layers, a narrow-lined ledger wrapped in stained muslin. A cassette tape in a cracked plastic case with a label written in blocky hand index. Kitchen, a manila envelope fat with photographs. And tucked into a cutout of foam, a safe deposit key on a brass tag stamped Made West Trust 317. Beneath even that, hidden where fingers wouldn't naturally search, lay a single .38 round with the copper dulled to brown and 3 letters scratched into its side. R.E.D. Nia reached first because she was the age that believed touching a thing made it truer. Her fingers hovered over the tape like it could bite. The block letters thrilled and terrified. Why kitchen? Because every revolution starts there, the other woman said, mouth dry with a humor that used to be wine and now was dust. Evan slid the ledger out and let it fall open near the middle, the way lawyers do when they're feeling lucky. Names weren't names. Cotta names held in the careful script of someone who thought neatness could prevent blood. Juniper, Stone, Larkspur, Choir, Astrid, House. Dates ran down the margins like rosary beads, prayers counting themselves. Transactions were not dollars, but lists. Bolts of cloth, 2 radio parts, 4, .223 ammo, 60, sugar, 25 pounds, gasoline, lamp, 5 gal, peas, 3. Next to certain entries, red check marks bled through like someone had pressed the ink too hard and wanted to hurt the page. House, Evan read softly. There he is. The woman Lila pronounced. That name came later. There was a house before he was a man. The roll passed like a coat to whoever controlled the favors. The last one wore it like a skin. Who are you now? Nia asked, unable to let that go. If you were Lila then, who are you today? The woman tilted her head, measuring the space between past and present. In Biloxi, they call me Ruth. She smirked. It's a joke I made that stopped being funny. Ruth, Orome said, tasting the name like a test of flesh. You kept this. All this time. Ruth shrugged one shoulder. I kept it where he would least suspect, with the person he thought he had already broken. Evan looked up. He? Ruth splayed her fingers on the table like she might hold it steady. He isn't a man who exists in a single room. He's in rumors, in favors, in the gut column of your ledger. Don't say his letter in this kitchen any more than you have to. It makes doors open that we can't close. You mean H, Nia said, and Ruth laughed despite herself. Young people don't listen worth anything, she said, then softened. Good. Keep that a while. It will save you, and then it will cost you everything. We need to hear the tape, Evan said, practical as a hammer. If it's as explosive as it looks, better to know now than be surprised by it in court or on a doorstep. Cassette players in the hall closet, Ora May said, and then added, with a look that made Nia feel smaller and older at the same time. Top shelf, behind the winter scarves. Why behind scarves? Nia asked, because it seemed important that secrets live with warmth. Because it made me laugh, Ora May said. They set the small black player on the table and fed it 2A batteries from the junk drawer that had never been junk. The tape hissed when Evan pressed play, a blanket of noise that transported the kitchen to another room in another decade. A kitchen with metal, folding chairs, and a pot of bitter coffee, and voices damped by caution. A man spoke first, a baritone smoothed by education and danger. Roll call, please. No names. Stone, another man said. Juniper, a woman. Larkspur, another. Then choir. An low voice that could have been a creek talking at night. Astrid. Then a pause, someone tapping a pencil against a table. An old rhythm of nerves. House, the baritone said mildly, as if the word could be a person without being one. And then, in a voice that was composed and amused in equal measure, present. Evan glanced at Ruth. She had gone very still. The baritone continued. Tonight's agenda. Final timing on annex, assignments, call protocol, and the matter of the warning. Warning? Nia said, not understanding and understanding too much. The call, Ora May murmured, voice flayed. They were supposed to call. On the tape, a woman Larkspur spoke. We call the desk 20 minutes before the charge. It gives them time to clear. We leave pamphlets. We leave purpose. We don't leave bodies. That only works if they believe you, another voice said choir, dry as paper. They will, Larkspur insisted. House? The baritone asked, and the amused voice replied, I prefer. Ensure the odds before we speak the rules. Call if it'll be answered. It won't. Why? Juniper snapped. Because a janitor answers at night, but a deputy answers at dawn, House said, as if explaining weather. Dawn? We said 2:m. Anger wrapped the words like wire. We're adjusting. The baritone again. Stone's team will plant at 4:30. Detonate at 6:15. Commuter rush grants us explanation. That's not what we agreed. A woman's voice this time, lower than the others. Astrid. She sounded like someone who would count the numbers. Herself, and only believe a ledger she wrote. Risk increases if the building is empty, the baritone said. Message decreases if no one hears it fall. What is the message then? Astrid asked. That we're clever? That we can tell time? The message is that steel bends when we push, House purred. Silence on the tape crackled like fat in a skillet. We call, Astrid said. You will not, House corrected gently, like a teacher to a clever, dangerous child. You're benched. Why? Astrid asked, but the why was a knife. Because you've become a fuse in need of a match, Astrid, House said, and there was affection in it. Fuses burn too fast. Who takes the call? The baritone asked. Choir, House said. The tape popped like someone's knee. Voices rose, fell, sank. The meeting moved to other things. Routes, signals, the business of making a plan look like inevitability. Then at the end, a scrape of a chair, the tape catching a sentence spoken too close, too intimate to a recorder not meant to hear it. Do you trust him? A woman whispered. Astrid? Trust is a boat, House replied. It leaks and yet it floats long enough to get you where you're going. And if it sinks, she asked, then we swim, he said. The tape clicked. The player spun a while, then stopped with a neat snick that sounded like a door closing. No one spoke. Evan pressed his fingers into his eyes until lights blossomed there. Ruth stood with her arms around herself like her bones needed help staying in. Nia stared at the little machine like it had turned itself into something alive. "What does it mean?" she whispered, though she knew, and she wanted them to say it so she could hate them for making it true. "It means," Evan said hoarsely, "that the call they planned to make to save lives, the warning, was reassigned to someone who did not do it, or couldn't," Orame said. "Or wouldn't," Ruth said flatly. "Choir had a mouth that sang the parts House wrote." "You were Astrid," Nia said to her grandmother, looking for something to hang her certainty on. Orame looked at the tape player and did not answer. "What's our ED on the bullet?" Evan asked, because he was braver when he had letters and not faces. Ruth looked at the table, the wall, the lemon-yellow paint that had kept this kitchen from becoming a cave. "Redding," she said finally. "Isaac. He used to mark everything he thought he owned so the world would know. We teased him. He said you can't put your name on the wind, but you can etch it on a shell." "Why is his bullet in this box?" Nia asked. "Because the last time we were all together," Ruth said, "everybody was putting a piece of themselves in the fire like it could keep us warm. He put a bullet. Someone else put a lock of hair. Someone else a ring. It was dumb. It was holy. It was what kids do when they're trying to build a church out of a storm." "Is Isaac safe?" Orame asked. Ruth's face changed. "No." Lenora left Agent Klein in the conference room with coffee that tasted like cardboard repentance and walked out into the heat to find TJ, whose idea of an unmarked car was one with a bumper sticker that read, "My other ride is a prayer." "You seen anything?" she asked, squinting into the sun that was already ambitious. "A sedan keeps flirting with Miss Johnson's curb, same as before," he said. "Suit inside, hair like a golf pro who doesn't like to sweat. H," he said. "You know him?" "I know the letter he mailed himself." TJ took off his hat and scratched his head in the shape of a question mark. "You talk in poems when you're mad." "They're efficient." She glanced up the street. "How many eyes on the house?" "Me. A teenager on a porch with a phone who has more followers than the town has people. Miss Ellery behind a fern." "What about Walt?" Deputy Chief swung by at 8 to shake hands like a campaign poster. Said the feds were eager to partner. Which means eager to take. "Take what?" "On what?" "On conversations that make us better before somebody with a badge bigger than mine makes us worse." He looked at her hard. "You want me to stall the feds?" "No," she said. "I want you to be exactly who you are. Smile too much. Ask dumb questions that are actually smart. Keep House off the porch." "Copy?" He grinned. "Which porch?" She stared down the block at Orame's door, then at her own hand on her radio. "All of them," she said. When she got back to the station, Agent Klein had rearranged the chairs in a way that made the room feel like hers. "You trust your deputy chief?" Klein asked without preamble. "I trust him to be exactly who he is," Lenora said. "A man whose ambition is a room he doesn't know how to decorate?" "A man whose ambition is a car with tires he didn't buy," Lenora said. "He'll ride wherever someone else points him." Klein's mouth twitched. "How literary." "I grew up with a librarian for a mother," Lenora said. "The tape you're here for?" "It exists." Klein's eyes sharpened. "You've heard it?" "I've heard something. I'm telling you this because you arrived without swagger and with patience. That buys me trust for about 5 minutes. I'll spend it frugally," Klein said. "What's on it?" "Voices. A meeting. A plan that changed because men like to hear their names when buildings fall." "Does it identify who called off the warning?" "No, but it appoints it to a person who could have failed." "Or complied with someone else's adjustment," Klein said. "Or that," Lenora allowed. "The tape also makes clear the role of House wasn't a man so much as a title. He speaks. They move." Klein leaned back. House tends to be men, she said. We've chased 3 over the last 30 years. This current letter, he uses different bodies for different jobs. Like a coat, Lenora said, and Klein smiled with her eyes. What do you want, Sergeant? Klein asked. To keep my people from being ground up between a past that refuses to die and a present that refuses to understand. Klein considered her. You know you don't get to make that choice alone. That why you're here? Lenora asked, surprised at how tired her voice sounded. To let me share. Klein opened her folder, then closed it again because her folder wasn't going to convince this woman of anything. The FBI likes to swallow small towns and spit out resolved on a press release, she said. I don't. I like seeing people a second time and not having to hide from them. She tapped the table. Help me help you. Lenora took a breath that felt like a debt. The tape is at Ms. Johnson's house, she said, for the next 5 minutes. Meaning? Meaning if House is circling, he'll try to step inside, and he won't knock this time. Klein rose, already moving. Then let's go. They came through the back, the way men do when they want to pretend politeness while intending to take. 2 of them, both in their 40s wearing suits like uniforms, ties loose to suggest they could loosen your life. The one from the card walked in, like the air belonged to him. The second scanned the room with eyes that loved corners. Mr. Bright, H said, and his voice could have been any banker, any coach, any man who'd learned how to soften a sentence until the blade inside it slid in without anyone hollering. You decided not to call. I decided to hold, Devin said. And to inform law enforcement. We are, H said mildly. In our way. Get out of my kitchen. Ora May said, and the way she said it could have split fruit on the counter. H's gaze moved to her with the curiosity he reserved for museums. Ms. Johnson, I remember your pies. Apricot, yes? I remember your lies, she said. He smiled. Then we are both sentimental. He looked at the black box, open, the tape out. A small, almost sad sigh. You should have called me first. I could have walked you through what not to touch. Don't take another step, Devin said. He had a hand near the drawer where a new knife lay, the grandson of the one they'd carried off with the trunk. Or what? The second man asked, amused. You'll serve me? Papers? Pie? Nia slid between them without realizing she'd moved, heart banging the cupboard doors from the inside. She said, get out, she told H, voice steady because sometimes fear is a horse you ride or it rides you. H's eyes warmed with something like appreciation. You must be the granddaughter, he said. I admire your grandmother. She's managed to perform a disappearing act for decades without leaving. That's rare. Usually people have to run to be lost. We didn't ask for your admiration, Ruth said. No, he agreed. You asked me not to knock, and I obliged. I'm not here to frighten anyone. I'm here to return property. Return? Evan said. We're in a funhouse now. H glanced at the ledger on the table, the tape player, the key. Some of this never belonged to you, he said. Some of it never belonged to anyone. Some of it belongs to the wind. He reached into his jacket slowly and placed a small velvet pouch on the table with 2 fingers. It made the tiniest sound, a thud like a heartbeat. What's that? Nia asked. A marker, H said. Paid. By whom? Ruth asked. By a man who died in a building that was supposed to be empty, H said, letting the sentence leave a residue on the air. Interest has been compounding for 47 years. With gratitude, we set it down. Open it, Nia whispered to her grandmother, and Ora May did because she was not a woman who let men tell her what gifts meant. Inside the pouch lay a ring, thick gold, masculine, engraved on the inside with initials worn thin and a date, the 12th of July, 77. The date hit her in the sternum like a door. She closed her eyes, and the room swayed. When she opened them, she was somewhere else, A north side kitchen with laughter on credit and marigolds in the window. A man with hands too big for his coffee cup, twirling the ring on his finger while arguing that justice needed teeth. "Get out," she said again, and her voice shook in ways she didn't forgive. "Get out of my house." H inclined his head, almost a bow. "We'll talk again," he said. "We always do." "Walk out and don't turn your back to us," Ruth told him. "You might not like the world that gives you." He smiled at her like he appreciated the note. Then he and the second man were gone, the back screen door sighing behind them like a tired ant. Evan exhaled loudly, only after the silence had grown teeth. "You okay?" he asked, but it was a dumb question. No one was. He ran to the window to clock a plate, a make, a model, but the car had the decency to keep secrets. Nia touched the ring like it might insist on a story. "Who?" "Don't," Orame said, and Nia set the ring down because sometimes obedience wasn't obedience. It was mercy. Ruth leaned on the counter like her knees had opinions. "We can't hold this house," she said. "Not against men like him, not against men like the ones wearing nicer suits, who will show up with letters and a smile." "The FBI is on their way," Evan said. "Good," Ruth said. "Let them be late." "We could run," Nia said. "Where?" Evan asked. "Into history?" "It's already here." "Chicago," Orame said, not like a suggestion. The word hung in the kitchen like a billboard. Midwest Trust is a bank on Jackson and Wabash, or it was. Box 317. The key wants to go home. You can't drive to Chicago with a federal investigation turning circles on your yard, Evan said. "You'll be arrested at the county line." "Then we don't drive," Ruth said. "We go soft." "What's go soft?" Nia asked, needing definition. "Bus," Orame said, "or train. The way poor people move when they're thinking about money and not being seen." "You're not going alone," Evan said. "I'm not leaving you to guard a house with your law degree," she said. "You're a shield, but not the kind I need right now." The front door knocked like it remembered how to be polite. Evan slid to it. Lenora stood there with Agent Klein at her shoulder, the pair of them looking like an unlikely arrangement that might save or kill you, depending on the light. "We're coming in," Lenora said, and when Evan opened wider, she hugged the air of this kitchen like a child who'd been outdoors too long. Her eyes took everything in: tape, ledger, ring, key, faces, and found their places quickly, like a good hand at spades. Klein nodded at Orame. "Ma'am," she said, "we need to secure some items." "Like my life?" Orame asked. "We'll start small," Klein said evenly. "The tape would be helpful." "You heard it?" Lenora asked Evan. He nodded. "Pieces. Enough to know it will make everyone uglier than they want to be." Lenora met Orame's eyes. They were the same old eyes, just set in a different weather. "You're going to Chicago," Lenora said without being told. "I'm going to clean my own mess," Orame said. "You think the box holds a broom?" Klein asked. "I think the box holds the truth," Orame said. "And if not the truth, then proof of the lie. That's almost the same if you're brave." Klein looked at Lenora. This was her town, her woman. Lenora looked at Klein. This was her jurisdiction, her tape. Then both women looked at Nia, because the youngest often told the oldest what they'd already decided. "I'm going," Nia said. "No," three voices said at once. Evan, Klein, Lenora. "Absolutely," two other voices said, Orame and Ruth. "This is cute," Klein said. "It's not happening. You going to arrest me?" Orame asked, curious and not particularly cowed. "Please do." "I'm tired." Klein exhaled. "I am not here to make a spectacle. I am here to keep people from being dead." She looked at Lenora. "Can you keep your house in order?" "On a good day," Lenora said. "This isn't one." "Then we get creative," Klein said. She put both hands on the table, palms down. "Miss Johnson, I do not want you driving across state lines with federal evidence in your purse. But I do want to get to that box before the gentleman who left you party favors returns with a write-your-own warrant. You trust me enough to let me get you there quietly? Define quietly, Ora May said. They smiled at each other with recognition that had no business in a kitchen. Train, Klein said. Jackson has a route from New Orleans that stops in Meridian. We get you on there tonight. I will sit 3 rows back. Sergeant Pike will sit 3 rows ahead. We do not speak to each other. When we arrive, we walk like strangers. We open the box. We take what's inside. We make a decision based on what the ground tells us. What about the men who make doors open? Ruth asked. They like planes, Klein said. They hate Coach. Won't the bank flag a box dormant for 40 years? Evan asked. Klein shrugged. We bring a court order that encourages obedience. You had that ready? Lenora asked dryly. I know the shape of certain problems before they knock, Klein said. In the back of the kitchen, where her mother had once set up a card table and taught her how to lose without crying, Lenora's phone buzzed. TJ. Redding didn't show a gin. Neighbor says white van with temp tags at his place. You want me there? She typed fast. No, there's nothing there you can do without being a body they move. Circle back to Johnson House. Any more suits? Negative. Miss Ellery gave me a pound cake, he wrote. It's dry but thoughtful. Don't eat it, she texted. That woman salts her batter with eavesdropping. Too late, he wrote. Gossip tastes like lemon. She pocketed the phone and found everyone looking at her. Isaac Redding is missing, she said. We can assume he's with House, one way or another. Then we're late, Ruth said. Then we are right on time, Ora May said. We just don't know why yet. They packed like a field trip. A toque with sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, an old jacket because trains pretend they are winter even in August, a small Bible whose spine was cracked where grief had thumbed it. Evan protested in all the expected places and lost in all the expected ways. Agent Klein called a judge and spoke in a voice that made paperwork do what it was told. Lenora stood on the porch and watched the street become an audience. Nia went to her room for a toothbrush and stopped because the mirror showed a face she didn't quite recognize. The girl who had prom pictures on the wall and a vision board that had Chicago on it because of music and fashion, not because of archives and bones, had been evicted from her life in a single night. She stuffed the toothbrush into her bag and then, on impulse, pulled the ring from the velvet pouch and slid it on her thumb. It was heavy and it slipped. She curled her hand to keep it. When she came back to the kitchen, Lenora caught her wrist with a look, not a grab. Where'd you get that? She asked. It's a marker, Nia said. Paid. Meaning? Meaning if anybody asks me who I am, I'll show them a circle. That's not a legal definition, Even said, exhausted and fond. It's better, Nia said. They split like a trick, Ruth and Nia out the back with Agent Klein into a borrowed sedan that looked like a church parking lot. Ora May and Lenora out the front on foot, turning up Pine as if they were going to Miss Ellery's to return a bowl. Evan stayed on the porch with a book he wasn't reading and a court order he was, waiting for a squad car or a news van or a ghost. At the end of the block, a kid on a BMX bike fell in next to Lenora and smiled like the secret he was carrying was gum. Miss Pike, he said, glancing not at her but at the woman at her side. My cousin said there's a white van by the old cannery. Tell your cousin to mind his own, she said. He is, the kid said, and popped his front wheel. On Highway 80, the borrowed sedan slid into traffic like a minnow joining a school. Klein drove the way people from cities drove alert, without being afraid. Ruth sat in the passenger seat, with a paper bag on her lap, like she was ready to hyperventilate into it, or hand over a sandwich, depending on what the day required. In the back, Nia texted the 3 people who mattered, Maya, her best friend. Off-grid today. Call you if I can. Her cousin Troy in Jackson. If anybody asks, I'm with you. And herself, a note she'd found in her mother's old journal, copied years ago, that she sent to her own number when she needed spine. You are the story and the storyteller. Don't let anyone steal one to silence the other. The little whoosh when it sent settled her. At the station, Walt Parrish stood in the lobby with a smile that didn't need a reason. "Morning, Sarge," he said. "Word is the feds are riding shotgun with you today. I hope you made them a playlist." "We're carpooling in the direction of truth," she said, rushing by him. "You sure it wants to carpool?" he asked. "Truth seems like it's real particular." She didn't stop. You don't stop in front of men like Walt. You make them follow, or you make them talk to your back. At Meridian, a train station that smelled like diesel and coffee gave them their next disguise. Travelers. Klein had bought them cozy, anonymity in coach. People on their way to something else stared down at phones or up at screens like prayer. At the end of the platform, a man with a navy suit stood pretending to read a paper and failed. Klein clocked him, nodded barely. "Tail," she said. "How many?" Ruth asked. "Just the one," Klein said. "If he's smart, he'll switch in Birmingham. If we're smarter, we'll make him think he's winning and then ask him to buy us lunch." "Is that how the FBI entertains?" Nia asked. "We entertain with paperwork," Klein said. "Men like that do not eat carbs when they're working. It's their religion." "Then we can win," Ruth said. We packed bread. On the train, Lenora took her seat 3 rows up and across. She had a hat pulled low like she'd learned from TV. Klein took her 3 rows back and to the other side. Ruth and Nia sat together, sharing a window and pretzels like a ritual. The track started moving, and the quick miracle of Mississippi turning into Alabama began. Nia thought the land out the window looked like a story her grandmother might tell. Green, then greener, then a house that thought about falling down and decided to wait. The rhythm lulled her until the phone buzzed with a message from an unsaved number. She glanced at it because she was still young enough to think she could choose not to look. The text contained a photograph. Grainy, time-stung, but clear enough. Her mother, younger, hair in a scarf, smile like a dare, holding a baby with a ring on her thumb. The ring in the velvet pouch, now on Nia's own hand. Underneath, a message. "Hi, Nia. Ready to meet your father?" Ah, her mouth went dry. The heat of the train that had felt like a blanket now felt like a fever. She passed the phone to Ruth, whose fingers tightened until the case creaked. "Don't panic," Ruth said, "because panic is a door that opens onto a room with no air." She slid the phone back and patted Nia's knee once, a metronome. "Sit in your seat. Breathe. We're not with children. We are children who got old." Nia leaned forward, hair falling forward like a curtain. She swallowed and felt the ring heavy against her bone. "He has pictures," she whispered. "Of course he does," Ruth said. "He collects leverage the way some men collect keychains." "Is he lying?" "About being ready to introduce you?" Ruth said. "He's always ready to introduce you to the thing that breaks you." "I'm not breakable," Nia said, fierce and foolish. "Good," Ruth said. "Hold that while it's still true." 3 rows back, Klein's phone vibrated. She glanced and saw the same photo. Of course he sent it to her, too. He was reminding everyone that he had rooms they hadn't walked into. She looked past the headrest and met Lenora's eyes. Lenora tilted the brim of her hat in a gesture that said, "I see you seeing me." In the vestibule between cars, the man with the newspaper folded himself into the edge like origami. He texted a photo of 3 women in coach to someone labeled simply H. Then he looked up and found himself staring at a mirror of himself in the glass. And for a moment, he looked like a man who wished he was somewhere else. Chicago was a different kind of heat. Brick heat, bus exhaust heat, argument heat. The station poured them into a din that felt like a dare. Klein led like a current. Lenora followed like a shadow. Ruth kept pace like a woman who'd memorized this dance before and lost partners. They didn't speak to each other. They didn't need to. The box wanted to open, and men wanted the box. And once those things are true, the city arranges itself around them like iron filings around a magnet. Midwest Trust had changed its name 3 times since the ledger was written and kept its habits exactly as they were. The lobby was marble and intention. The man at the service desk looked at the court order like it was a trick, and then looked at Klein and decided she wasn't. He led them past a glass door that sealed too soft not to be expensive, down a hall that had arches and hush, into a room where vault doors made a sound like old gods clearing their throats. They were shown to a private stall with a table and a chair, asking politely to be betrayed. The attendant set a metal box, labeled 317 on the table, as if it might run. He left like a man who had learned to leave rooms before the important part started. Klein nodded at Ora May. "This is yours to open." "I think it never was," Ora May said. "But I suppose it's mine to end." The key clicked. The lid lifted. The inside did not glow. There was a second, smaller box, locked. A stack of folded onion skin paper wrapped in string. A packet of photographs with the corners bruised. A cassette twin to the one they'd heard, but with a new label and X, after. And a letter, the handwriting a hiccup in Ora May's chest. Familiar, tidy, slightly left slanted. She reached for the letter first, because that's where any woman who knows how grief works reaches. The note unspooled like a ribbon she'd tied 20 lifetimes ago. "Astrid, if you're reading this, the thing we thought we could outrun has learned our names again. You always said the past was a jealous lover. Me, I think it's a landlord. Either way, it knocks. The warning didn't go out. Maybe you think I failed you. I didn't. I made the call to a line that was never going to answer because the number House gave me wasn't a phone. It was a lesson. He moved the time to use us to make a point to someone who never cared. I can't prove any of this without burning us all down, so I've hidden proof of something else, the ledger that isn't a ledger. It's the map. It tells you who paid for which door and who walked through. House's name is in there if you look at it wrong. You always were good at looking wrong until it became right. The second tape is what I recorded the night after. It won't save us. It may save a girl we haven't met yet from believing men like him can decide what our hands mean. If I don't see you again, forgive me for the ring. Give it back to my child if you ever find her." Nia's heart stopped like a car in heat, and then surged back so fast she thought she might vomit. "Her," she said. He said her. Ruth steadied herself on the metal table because it had accepted more history than it deserved. "Choir was not a name we said as a prayer," she whispered. "He was a man who could make you think thunder was applause." Lenora stared at the note and thought about her mother, about Redding, about a janitor and a clerk whose names she had taught herself to say before bed. Klein listened, because that's what you do when the story shows you where to kneel. Ora May put the letter down and lifted the packet of onion skin paper. The pages were covered in columns of numbers and letters that didn't make words until you tilted your head, like Ruth had said. When she did, the code told on itself, initials hidden as end letters of phrases, dates that were addresses, $signs that were actually numbers of bodies you could move with favors. It wasn't money. It was people. Who they could make go walk into rooms. Who they could make leave. Who owed them breath. Whose house? Nia asked, as if reading the paper aloud might make it show his face. What's his name? Ruth made a sound like a laugh had broken its leg. You want a name like it can be a bullet? Yes, Nia said. Something I can point. So he can duck? Ruth said. She tapped the page. He is this. He's the system we made, and the system that made us. He is a man wearing a common name, so you can't accuse his mother of malice. He is a county clerk, and a preacher, and a cop, and a professor, and a fixer, and a barber who knows which sideburn to level. He is many, and also he might be one. That's the trick. Klein picked up the second tape. We can listen in the car, she said. I'd rather not do it here. This room amplifies guilt. Lenora nodded. We should move. The longer we're under, the more likely someone with a digital key we don't know about wants to join us. Wait, Nia said. She lifted the small locked box. It had no keyhole, just a seam. Slide, Ruth said, and Nia did, thumb along the edge like she was worrying a scab. The top hissed a little as it gave. Inside lay a photograph, one of a man holding a newborn in a hospital room with curtains the color of resignation. The man wore the ring they'd been given, his hair an argument with a comb, his smile the sun. The baby wore a knit cap. Beside them, half cut off by the frame, stood a woman with an expression that could stop wars. Nia recognized none of these faces and all of them. On the back of the photo, in the same tidy hand, for I, when she is ready, and under that, a name that made the room smaller, Marlon Ellery. Ellery? Lenora said, and she tasted bile, because sometimes a coincidence wasn't. Miss Ellery? Nia choked, thinking of lemon matter, and affirmed that he'd more than gossip. It could be a cousin, Evan would say later. It could be 1,000 men. It could be a common name. But in the vault, with the door humming like a hymn, none of that comfort was available. Miss Ellery had a son, Lenora said. He drowned in 82. People whispered it wasn't an accident. She stopped going to the lake. She started keeping watch at windows. Klein's eyes went sharp. We need to leave. They gathered the things they could hold without screaming. They left what paper they could copy later. They signed forms. They smiled at the attendant like sinners at an altar. They walked out of the bank into an afternoon crowds used as camouflage. The man in the navy suit stepped off a curb half a block away, folded his newspaper, and made a call. On somebody's desk miles away, a ceramic mug with the letter H made a quiet thump as a hand put it down. In the train station bathroom, inside a stall that said nitrogen monoxide smoking in a font that had given up, Nia hit call on the unsaved number because she was 18 and the ring had turned into a dare, and the hunger in her was a bonfire. A man answered on the first ring, polite. Yes? You said you could introduce me to my father, she said. A smile she couldn't see settled into the phone. I can introduce you to the man who thought he was, H said, and to the man who became it when he couldn't. Where? He gave her a street corner she didn't know, and a time that was clearly now in the grammar of men like him. Come alone, he said. She hung up and stared at the text she had sent herself. You are the story and the storyteller, and thought maybe the story is a bomb, and the storyteller is a woman holding it pretending it's a loaf of bread. When she stepped out of the stall, Ruth was there, leaning against the tiled wall, with a look that said the old guard never stops guarding. Don't, she said. I have to, Nia said. That's what he counts on, Ruth said. That you think have to is a mirror, and not a knife. She scanned the room like a battlefield. We'll do it my way. What's your way? You go alone, she said, but not unaccompanied. Is that a riddle? Nia snapped, then bit her lip because she wasn't angry at the woman. She was angry at the universe for being a story with too many authors. Ruth smiled, humor back, zombie walking. It's a leash, she said. She tied Nia's scarf looser around her neck and slid the small cassette into her tote like a secret. She had no intention of sharing with the right people at the right time. Where are you going? Lenora asked when they rejoined, eyes reading their faces like a poem you check twice. The bathroom, Ruth said cheerfully. Again? Yes, she said, because that's what age gives you. The right to pee and lie. Klein had moved them toward the exit, like a chess player shepherding pawns. Evan, who had flown up on a plane that had offended his body and landed with a rage that had calmed into strategy, met them with a cab. "We have a hotel near the bank," he said. "One of those places that pretends it's a library." "Good," Klein said. "I like shushing as an aesthetic." Lenora's phone vibrated with a message from TJ. "Ms. Ellery out front watering her lawn with no hose. Smile looks like a fork." "Keep eyes," she replied. "Don't touch the fork." Nia slipped her hand into her tote like she was making sure she hadn't forgotten her chapstick. The ring on her thumb clicked against the zipper, and she wondered if her mother had worn it and done this exact sound and had it, woken her at night hearing metal against metal, and thought it was a man coming back. On the sidewalk out front, the city moving in its practiced chaos, a child screamed with delight at a pigeon. A man hawked water out of a cooler with a price that assumed thirst. The world didn't shift for her errands. It waited to see if she'd become interesting. "Don't you dare?" a voice murmured at her shoulder, and she realized Lenora had read her mind again. The sergeant's hand hovered near her elbow without touching, a gravity more than a grip. "If you go, you send a pin. You keep your eyes up. You don't let him narrate you." "You can't stop me," Nia said. It was not defiance so much as fact. She was a girl with a box of ghosts in her bag and a letter from a dead man in her throat. "No," Lenora said. "I can only go first." It was mean, and it was love. Across the street, a man leaned against a lamppost like he had invented waiting. He was in a navy suit that had forgotten how to wrinkle, hair the color of a promise people believed. He saw Nia see him. He let his gaze flick past her to the women around her. Then he smiled like he had always been her father, if only someone had told him sooner. "Don't move," Ruth said under her breath. "Let him come to us." He stepped into the crosswalk, a car honking like a chorus. Nia's phone buzzed. A new text from H, a picture of a woman's hand holding a baby's foot. The woman's nail polish was chipped red. There was a ring on her thumb. "Hello, Nia," he said as he reached the curb, and for a second she saw the boy he must have been before he turned into a letter. "I knew your mother." "I don't know you," she said. "That's the clever part," he said, and smiled like a problem he'd already solved. Before she could decide whether to spit or pray, a panel van rolled to the curb, side door sliding open in a motion that was all teeth. A man with a hood and no patience reached. Lenora moved, hand a blur, knee somewhere surgical. The man folded with a sound like paperwork being filed. Klein was there, badge lightening, gun not even needing to king the board to rule it. People screamed with the delight and fear of those who know they are in a story. H's mouth quirked as if to say, "See? We can all perform." Then he stepped back, hands visible, polite. "We had an appointment," he told Nia conversationally, as Klein pushed him away with a stare. "Rain check?" "I'm not your calendar," she said, because she had to say something. "Everyone is someone's," he said, and then melted into the crowd so neatly it looked choreographed. Sirens approached like consequences. Klein shoved Nia toward Evan, who reached like a catcher in a world without baseball. "Back," Klein said. "Hotel. Now. Where?" Lenora asked, scanning for more vans. "Elevator," Klein said. "No more outside moments until I say the word." They moved as a single animal. In the distance, House watched from another angle. A different suit, a different posture, a different man altogether, perhaps, or maybe the same. He smiled at the efficiency. He texted one word to a number that knew how to make trouble. "Begin." Back in Lark, Miss Ellery stood at her sink with the ring indentation, ghosting the skin of her finger, and watched a white van park across from the Johnson house, its engine idling like a home. She wiped her hands on a dish towel that had been her mother's and dialed a number she'd promised not to call 30 years ago. When the voice answered, she said, "It's time," and hated herself for being ready. And in Meridian, a boy on a BMX did wheelies in a church parking lot and shouted to no one. "They're gonna be in the paper," and practice made that sound exactly like joy. On the 15th floor of the hotel that pretended to be a library, in a room that smelled like books and money, Klein set the second tape in a machine with a headphone jack and pressed play. Choir's voice filled the room like smoke. "Confession is a trick word," he said. "This isn't that. This is a note you write for the girl who thinks fire can only warm and never scar." The warning wasn't made because it was never meant to be. The man who told us he would make our story safer wanted it louder. He wanted bodies. He needed them. He's not one of us. He never was. He looks like us, but he has a badge under his skin. Lenora and Orome looked at each other then, identical horror carving out the spaces behind their eyes. "And he works down there in your little town, in your little station, where he's going to grow up into something that eats. You think you know him. You shake his hand at parades. You don't see the letter he wears around his throat. You will." The tape clicked on like a nightmare that had found new fuel. Somewhere on a street 2 blocks away, H smiled, because even losing could be a win if it put your pieces where you wanted them. In a house in Lark, a woman with a fern in her window stared at a photograph of a man with a ring who had drowned and thought, "Not accident. Never accident." In a hotel hallway, Nia leaned against a door, knuckles white around a ring that suddenly felt less like a marker, paid, and more like a key that would open every mouth in this town until they bled. "We shouldn't have listened to this here," Evan said, voice thin. "We had to," Klein said, "because now I know who to call." "Who?" Lenora asked, but she already knew. The line of her mouth wrote the name and then erased it before it could echo. Because sometimes it's not the past that's jealous. It's the present refusing to share. The hotel room felt too small for the truths they were collecting. The second tape sat in the player like a dare. The words they'd just heard about a man in their station, in their parades, hung heavy enough to bend the air. Lenora had gone pale, the kind of pale that meant her mind was already making lists of names. "Who?" Nia asked, eyes flicking from her grandmother to Lenora. "Who's he talking about?" Lenora didn't answer right away. She was staring at the carpet like it could give her permission. Finally, she said, "If I say it, we don't leave this room the same." "Then say it," Ruth said. Walt Parrish. The name landed like a gunshot. Evan sat back hard in his chair. "Deputy Chief Parrish?" "The same one smiling through every crime scene," Lenora said. "Choir's talking about someone who wore a badge then, still wearing one now. And Walt's been climbing this ladder since before I joined. Always in the right place at the right time. Always too close to things he shouldn't know about. Klein didn't flinch. Your boss is second. Fits the profile community trust, decades of access, just enough ambition to build leverage, not enough to risk open power. That's why House survives," Ruth said. "He hides in the polite men you think will water your plants when you're gone." Nia's stomach turned. "So what, he killed people in Chicago and then came home like nothing happened?" "Men like him don't see it as killing," Orame said. "They see it as making a point." Klein was already moving, snapping orders into her phone for surveillance, quiet warrants. "If we pull this thread wrong, he'll know. If he knows, the rest of your town is in play." "We don't have time," Lenora said. "If he suspects we've got the tapes, he'll come for them or us before sunrise." Evan looked between them. "Then what's the play?" Klein looked at Orame. "You want to finish this? Then we give him one last chance to make a mistake in the open." They went back to Lark the way they'd left, quiet, separate, shadows instead of headlines. By the time they reached town, night was a blanket over the streetlights. Walt Parrish's cruiser was parked under the elm outside the station, empty. Inside Aura May's kitchen, they set the tapes, the ledger, and the letter on the table like bait. Lenora took her sidearm off safe. Klein checked her watch. "He's going to walk in," she said. "He's going to pretend to be curious. And then he's going to reach for what's not his." Nia's heart was hammering. "And if he doesn't? Then we know he's smarter than we thought," Lenora said. "Which means we find another way." The knock came at 11:23 p.m. 2 taps, and one a rhythm too familiar to be random. Lenora opened the door. Walt Parrish stood there, smiling like he'd been invited for pie. "Evening, Sarge. Thought I'd check on our famous neighbor." "Come in," Lenora said. Walt stepped into the kitchen, eyes sweeping the table. He stopped at the tapes. "These new?" "From the attic," Aura May said. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, already reaching. "No," Lenora said, but not fast enough to hide the fact that she was watching his hands. Walt's fingers brushed the annex after tape. "You know, this looks familiar. Like something from a long time ago." He smiled at Nia. "Things were different then. People didn't understand what had to be done." "And you did?" Nia asked, voice shaking with fury. "I kept things in line," Walt said, not ashamed. "Still do." "By killing?" she said. He laughed softly. "By keeping the right people quiet." Klein stepped forward, badge up, voice steady. "Walter Parrish, you're under arrest for." Walt moved fast for a man his age. His hand went to his waistband, pulling something small, metallic. Lenora had her gun up before the scrape of metal cleared the holster. "Don't," she warned. Walt froze, not because he was afraid, but because he realized he was cornered in a room full of women who knew exactly who he was. "Who else knows?" he asked, scanning their faces. "Enough," Klein said. "You think the hearth dies with me?" His smile was wrong, too wide. "It never dies. It just changes hands." "You're done," Lenora said. "I was done the day I came back from Chicago," he said, almost a whisper. Then he set the gun on the table, palms up. "Do it?" No one moved. For a moment, the whole room felt the weight of what that choice meant. Klein broke it. "Cuff him." Lenora did, reading him his rights while his eyes stayed fixed on Aura May. "You kept running," he said to her, almost admiring. "That's why you're still here." "No," she said. "I stopped running. That's why you're not." The trial took months. Most of what was in the tapes never made it to the public, buried under national security exemptions and sealed evidence. But the ledger redacted and retyped was enough to end Walt Parrish's career and tie him to the People's Hearth bombings. Klein went back to Jackson. Lenora got promoted to acting chief. Ruth disappeared again, leaving only a postcard from Biloxi with the words, "We're never done, but we get breathers." And Nia? She kept the ring, not as a marker of debt, but as a reminder that her family's story wasn't something she'd been handed. It was something she could write. One evening, months later, Aura May was back at her kitchen table, the apricot pie cooling in the window. Nia came in with a bag of groceries and a smile that was tired but whole. "They'll ask again," Aura May said without looking up. "I know," Nia said. "What will you tell them?" "That I know how to tell a story," Nia said, "and when not to." Aura May smiled, cutting the pie. "Good girl." Outside, the cicadas started up, and somewhere down the block, someone was knocking 2 taps, then 1. This time, Aura May didn't move. Not every story ends with justice. Some just stop where the paperwork does. But if you listened closely, this wasn't just about what happened. It was about what we ignore, the assumptions we let slide, the voices we tune out because they don't come in the right tone. Somewhere, someone's living with the fallout of this story, not as a headline, but as their everyday. So if this story stayed with you, don't let it fade. Shine it forward. Ask more. Doubt what's too quiet. Because what we choose to see or not see decides what happens next. Like, comment, share, not for clicks, but for clarity. Because awareness is how silence breaks, and how truth finds daylight.